Imagine being a soldier, captured and thrown into the grim world of a POW camp, expecting cold barracks, meager rations, and endless misery. Now, picture the shock when reality flips completely. German POWs during World War II arrived in American camps expecting hardship, but instead, they were met with something entirely unimaginable: Coca-Cola served ice-cold, creamy ice cream on sunny afternoons, a taste of home in the middle of a war zone. Letters and diaries later revealed their disbelief, their confusion, their quiet awe at the kindness offered by their supposed enemies. Men who had fought fiercely against the Allies found themselves hesitating to believe the generosity before them. What was this strange, bewildering world where captives were treated like guests rather than prisoners? Today, we uncover the astonishing story of American POW camps that shocked the German soldiers to their core, and forever changed the way they remembered the war. By the time German POWs were shipped across the Atlantic to the United States, most expected the worst. Tales of harsh camps in Europe had reached them: cold, overcrowded barracks, barely enough food to survive, and a constant fear for their lives. The war had hardened these men, leaving them suspicious and wary of any sign of kindness. Yet, when they arrived in America, a completely different reality awaited. Instead of the brutality they anticipated, they found clean bunkhouses, organized routines, and astonishingly, treats that seemed almost impossible in a time of global conflict. Coca-Cola flowed freely, ice cream was served regularly, and small comforts, books, games, and recreational activities, were made available to lift their spirits. These were not just small gestures, they were carefully orchestrated acts of humanity, designed to maintain order and morale, but also to bewilder and disarm. For men who had seen the horrors of battle, these moments were almost surreal. The shock, confusion, and unexpected gratitude would be recorded in letters, diaries, and memories, moments that revealed a side of World War II rarely told: the surprising generosity of an enemy who chose compassion over cruelty. When German soldiers were captured on the battlefields of North Africa and Europe, most carried with them the weight of defeat and the expectation of suffering. Prisoner transport across the Atlantic was a harrowing experience. Cramped, crowded ships became floating prisons where men shared tales of hardship and whispered fears of what awaited them on the American continent. They had heard the rumors: camps with barbed wire, guards ready to punish, and meals barely enough to sustain life. The soldiers prepared themselves mentally for what they believed would be a continuation of the misery they had already endured. But the first glimpse of the American ports brought confusion. Soldiers were met with orderly procedures, efficient processing, and an almost civilian-like approach to their reception. Guards treated them with a level of courtesy that was completely foreign, calling them "her" and addressing concerns without harshness. This was not the hostile environment they had been trained to fear. Letters later revealed that the initial moments of arrival sparked whispers of disbelief among the men. Was this a trick? Were they being set up for humiliation or punishment? As they boarded trains to their assigned camps, the POWs took in their surroundings with a mixture of skepticism and awe. The trains were clean, well-maintained, and surprisingly comfortable. Officers provided clear instructions, and even small gestures of kindness, such as handing out snacks during long rides, further deepened the sense of incredulity. Many POWs recounted that it was almost impossible to reconcile the reality before them with their preconceptions of American cruelty. Once at the camps, the contrast became even more pronounced. Barracks were spacious, organized, and equipped with basic furniture. Common areas allowed for recreation and social interaction, a stark departure from the harsh isolation they had imagined. The presence of nurses, cooks, and administrators who spoke calmly and respectfully added to the surreal experience. Soldiers began to notice small signs of attention to their comfort: extra blankets, warm meals, and structured schedules that allowed for rest and personal time. For men who had been conditioned to expect brutality at every turn, this arrival was nothing short of a revelation. The shock and confusion etched on their faces told a story that no words could fully capture. In letters home, some described it as a strange, almost dreamlike experience, one that challenged everything they had believed about their enemies. The seeds of disbelief had been planted, and little did they know, the surprises were only just beginning. Once settled into the camps, the German POWs quickly realized that their expectations of hardship were wildly inaccurate. Instead of facing relentless punishment or meager rations, they were met with a structured routine designed not only to maintain order but also to provide comfort and leisure. Mess halls were well organized, with a variety of food items that went far beyond the bare minimum needed to sustain life. Soldiers were astonished to discover that their daily meals included fresh bread, vegetables, and even occasional desserts, a stark contrast to the meager rations they had endured on the battlefields. The real surprise, however, came in the form of small luxuries that the Germans had never imagined in a prison camp. Coca-Cola, the iconic American beverage, was freely available at certain times, its fizzy sweetness providing an unexpected moment of delight. Ice cream, creamy and cold, became a symbol of this strange new reality, handed out during recreation or in simple gestures meant to boost morale. These were not just tokens of kindness, they were intentional acts that created an atmosphere of normalcy and humanity in the midst of war. Recreation facilities, sports equipment, and organized leisure activities added to the POWs' disbelief. Soccer matches, chess games, and access to books and newspapers gave the men opportunities to occupy their minds, maintain routines, and even socialize. For many, this was the first time in months, or even years, that they could experience a semblance of ordinary life. Letters written home conveyed shock and admiration for the unexpected generosity, often expressing a mix of gratitude and confusion. Camp staff were polite, professional, and surprisingly attentive. German POWs were required to follow strict schedules, but the enforcement was fair and measured, never cruel. Even minor grievances, such as issues with bedding or personal hygiene, were addressed promptly. This level of organization and respect was almost unimaginable to men who had been conditioned to anticipate hostility at every step. These acts of hospitality were not just superficial gestures, they had a profound psychological impact. The German soldiers began to question their own assumptions, slowly realizing that not all Americans were enemies in the traditional sense. The boundaries between captor and captive were softened by gestures that combined practicality with genuine care, creating an environment that was both controlled and unexpectedly humane. The POWs were bewildered, but beneath the confusion, seeds of respect and cautious trust began to take root. The initial shock of being treated with kindness quickly evolved into a complex mix of emotions among the German POWs. Many soldiers could hardly believe their eyes when they were handed ice cream cones or offered Coca-Cola for the first time. These small acts of generosity, seemingly trivial in the grand scale of the war, sent waves of confusion and disbelief through men hardened by years of battle. Soldiers who had been trained to expect cruelty from their enemies began to question everything they had believed about the Americans. Some POWs wrote detailed letters to friends and family, describing a reality that seemed almost surreal. One soldier recalled stepping into the mess hall, expecting the harsh, cold environment typical of European camps, only to find tables neatly arranged with steaming meals and cheerful attendants offering words of courtesy. Another described the feeling of holding a sweet ice cream cone, realizing that the enemy was providing a taste of comfort instead of inflicting punishment. Such moments were disarming, breaking down psychological barriers that had been reinforced by months of combat. The reactions went beyond surprise. Some men felt embarrassment and guilt, struggling to reconcile the humanity shown to them with the horrors they had committed in the war. Others expressed cautious gratitude, uncertain if they were being tested or deceived. In group discussions and letters, the POWs debated whether such kindness was genuine or a calculated tactic to keep them compliant. Despite these uncertainties, the psychological effect was undeniable. The men became calmer, more cooperative, and less likely to resist the rules of the camp. Even officers, who had initially maintained a strict military mindset, found themselves disarmed by the hospitality. They marveled at the order, cleanliness, and organization of the camps, noting in diaries how the Americans managed to combine control with compassion. The mix of awe, disbelief, and reluctant admiration created a unique atmosphere, one in which the captives began to see the enemy not solely as a threat, but as human beings capable of kindness and fairness. The impact of these reactions rippled through daily life in the camps. POWs attended recreation, participated in educational activities, and slowly adapted to a system that valued order through respect rather than fear. For the first time, many soldiers experienced a sense of dignity and autonomy. These psychological shifts, born from simple yet deliberate acts of hospitality, would leave an enduring impression on the men, shaping their memories of the war long after they returned home. For the German POWs, one of the most striking realizations during their time in American camps was the vast difference between these facilities and the ones they had either experienced or heard about in Europe. In Germany-occupied territories or on the Eastern Front, prisoner camps were infamous for overcrowding, inadequate food, harsh discipline, and relentless exposure to cold and disease. The men had been conditioned to expect severe hardship and unyielding cruelty as part of their daily existence. The moment they arrived in the United States, these assumptions were shattered. Barracks in American camps were spacious and clean, often equipped with comfortable beds and proper heating systems. The mess halls offered variety and sufficient nutrition, a stark contrast to the thin, repetitive rations that had defined life in European camps. Even the smallest details, clean linens, structured schedules, and recreational spaces, were absent in the POWs' prior experiences, yet here they were, provided consistently and without hesitation. Such arrangements were not merely practical, they conveyed a surprising respect for human dignity. The contrast extended beyond physical conditions. Discipline in American camps was firm but fair, based on rules and procedures rather than fear and punishment. Guards treated prisoners with politeness and patience, explaining instructions rather than enforcing compliance through intimidation. German soldiers could not help but notice that the hierarchy and order of the camps functioned more smoothly through mutual understanding than through coercion, a method unfamiliar to many who had served on the front lines. This stark disparity caused many POWs to reflect deeply on the differences between the Allied and Axis approaches to warfare and captivity. Letters and journals reveal astonishment at how their captors managed to maintain control while simultaneously allowing small comforts, recreational activities, and even educational opportunities. For soldiers accustomed to brutal environments, these observations were almost revolutionary, challenging long-held notions about the enemy and the morality of war. Moreover, the psychological effects were profound. Where European camps often bred resentment, despair, and constant fear, American camps cultivated calm, cooperation, and even a hesitant sense of security. POWs reported feeling less stressed, less aggressive, and more willing to participate in camp activities. This environment did more than sustain life, it preserved the prisoners' mental well-being and forced them to reconsider their assumptions about human nature, generosity, and the role of compassion in the midst of conflict. The story of German POWs being treated with kindness and offered unexpected luxuries such as Coca-Cola and ice cream has left a lasting imprint on military history and human understanding of wartime conduct. Unlike many other conflicts, where prisoner treatment often mirrored the brutality of battle, the American approach demonstrated that discipline, order, and compassion could coexist. Historians have pointed out that this not only improved the daily lives of captives but also contributed to a significant shift in perceptions about humane treatment of prisoners of war. The legacy of these camps is multifaceted. On one level, they provided a practical lesson in camp management. Soldiers who are treated with respect and provided with adequate nutrition and recreational opportunities are calmer, more cooperative, and less likely to resist authority. The psychological impact was profound, as POWs experienced a level of dignity rarely seen in wartime. Letters and memoirs reveal that many German soldiers carried these memories for decades, often reflecting on the unexpected generosity they encountered with astonishment and, in some cases, gratitude. Moreover, these experiences influenced post-war discussions on international law and the treatment of POWs. The Geneva Conventions emphasized the humane treatment of captives, and American practices during World War II provided a model for implementation. Military strategists and policymakers studied the psychological effects of compassionate captivity, recognizing that humane treatment could reduce hostility, foster compliance, and even influence enemy morale indirectly. The surprising generosity shown in these camps became a historical case study in the balance between security, discipline, and humanity. The impact was not limited to the soldiers themselves. American guards and camp administrators also underwent subtle transformations, as they navigated the challenge of enforcing order without cruelty. The mutual respect that developed between captors and captives created a unique social dynamic, one that blurred the rigid distinctions of enemy and prisoner in everyday interactions. POWs reported forming friendships, engaging in cultural exchanges, and even learning skills that would later benefit them upon returning to Germany. In retrospect, these camps illustrate that acts of kindness, even small ones like serving a sweet treat or a cold beverage, can have enduring consequences. The shock experienced by German POWs was not merely about ice cream or Coca-Cola, it was about the realization that compassion could exist even in wartime. The story serves as a reminder that humanity can persist in the most unlikely circumstances and that choices made during conflict can resonate far beyond the battlefield, shaping perceptions, policies, and the memories of generations to come. As we look back on the experiences of German POWs in American camps, it becomes clear that their story is not just one of captivity, it is a story of the unexpected triumph of humanity amid the horrors of war. Soldiers who had anticipated cruelty, deprivation, and unending hardship instead found themselves confronted with an astonishing level of care, respect, and kindness. Coca-Cola, ice cream, and small comforts may seem trivial, but in the context of wartime captivity, they became powerful symbols of empathy and moral courage. The impact on the POWs was profound. Many recounted that these gestures, coupled with structured routines and fair treatment, restored a sense of dignity that had been stripped away on the battlefield. They were reminded that even in a world torn apart by violence, civility and compassion could persist. These experiences challenged long-held beliefs about the enemy and forced soldiers to reconsider their notions of honor, humanity, and the nature of warfare. For some, it was a deeply unsettling revelation, for others, a moment of relief and gratitude that they would carry for the rest of their lives. This story also provides valuable lessons for future generations. It demonstrates that the treatment of prisoners is not merely a matter of logistics or compliance but a reflection of moral principles and national character. The United States' approach to POW camps during World War II became a model for humane treatment and highlighted the strategic benefits of combining discipline with empathy. Calm, cooperative, and psychologically healthy prisoners proved easier to manage, reducing conflict within the camps and fostering a surprising sense of mutual respect. Ultimately, the story of German POWs enjoying Coca-Cola and ice cream is more than an anecdote, it is a testament to the power of human kindness, even in the darkest of times. It reminds us that history is not solely defined by battles, weapons, or strategy but also by the choices individuals make in the way they treat others. These moments of generosity and civility, small as they may seem, can leave an enduring imprint on the minds and hearts of those who experience them, reshaping memories, perceptions, and the very fabric of history itself. As we reflect on these events, we are reminded that even amidst global conflict, acts of compassion can shine like a beacon, leaving an indelible mark on the human spirit and forever changing the way we remember the war.